All right, welcome everybody to the next episode of Rxperience. I am your host, Chad Wurz with ASCP, alongside my tag team partner, Tom Hansel. And we have a really special episode today. I'm very excited about this. From AIHP, we have Cynthia Boyle and John Grabenstein, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. But we're going to talk about America 250 and this, I think it's, if I can do it right, semi-quincentennial.
You did it.
See,
yes.
I did it.
It's great.
The 250th anniversary of the United States. It's a big year for this country. Obviously, in this area, it's a big deal being in D.C. By happenstance, our annual meeting is at the end of October, and it is here in National Harbor. So we're going to lean in heavily to this theme for this year, and it's pretty exciting.
It is. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, tell us a little bit about yourselves. I'll start with you, Cynthia.
Okay.
Give us your pharmacy origin story.
We were just, Chad and I earlier today were at the JCP meeting in Alexandria, and, all the pharmacy leaders that are elected and the CEOs are there representing the different organizations, and it brings you right into the present. So to go back into the origin story is a bit of a jolt, but I went to the University of Oklahoma and the College of Pharmacy, and at the time, after I graduated, my husband was would join Navy flight training. And so that took us to other states and other licenses along the way, how that goes, and wound up, by way of Florida and Texas, and then eventually into Southern Maryland. And so I was always, a long time, a community pharmacist. I was able to, I just thrived in that, and I loved it. At one point, I also consulted on substance abuse facility nearby, just the people aspect of it, which, thank goodness, that's what I really loved. At some point along the way, I wanted to reinvent, re-educate, update, where I was in practice. And that was where it became possible to do the non-traditional PharmD program through the University of Maryland. And we were, the president of the Board of Pharmacy was in my class, and, all sorts of folks. But it really was so helpful, and it really added to what I already knew in pharmacy. And long story short, I wound up joining the faculty, really got it reinvented, and have been involved in state associations and national ones. So I really enjoyed working in experiential education in particular, because it's the intersection of education, all the stakeholders, and also the curriculum, that happens in schools, and to help people get ready and find their path and all of that. I really enjoyed that over time.
Awesome. John?
My turn. I'm a Duquesne University School of Pharmacy grad, 1980.
So a Sooner and a Duke here, right?
There we are, Dukes. A Duke, that's okay.
Yeah.
And I paid my way through college with an ROTC scholarship. So I owed Uncle Sam 4 years of service when I was finished, and they kept giving me the Army kept giving me good jobs and good jobs and good jobs. And so I stayed for 27 years. And
amazing. That's awesome.
The weather map comes on, and I go there. That's where I live now. So the Army taught me vaccines, which was important. And along the way, APHA asked me to write the training program for pharmacists to vaccinate in 1996. And, a couple of months later, we were in Jackson, Mississippi, running that first course. And 500,000 pharmacists and technicians later, that's a normal thing for pharmacy practice. Retired from the Army in 2006. New vaccines, so I got hired by Merck Vaccines, the manufacturer, to run their global medical affairs department, and that was eye-opening. I knew the FDA had a file cabinet. I knew Merck had a file cabinet for the FDA, but it didn't dawn on me that Merck had a file cabinet for the UK, for France, for Germany, for Brazil, for Japan, for Australia. And so the global stuff was really fascinating. And how do you deal not just with the CDC, but the counterparts of CDC around the world? And I learned a lot with that. Retired from them in 2020, and thought I was, going to put my feet up. And the pandemic hits, and everybody's scrambling to help pharmacists vaccinate with the new COVID vaccine. And I said to Mitch Rotholtz at APHA at the time, somebody needs to write up what pharmacists are accomplishing. And he said, go ahead, do it. And so that publication shows that pharmacists gave more COVID vaccinations than all other professions combined, 50.5%. But that means more than all others combined. And so I'm a vaccine guy and a historian. That's how Cynthia and I are both. History fascinates me. The Army took me to a lot of historic places, and the history of vaccines. And we're doing some things for pharmacy for America 250, and that's sort of why we're here today.
Absolutely. I don't know that I knew that you wrote the immunization program for APHA. That had to be wild to see that put into legislation during COVID and activate. Like, because for us in long-term care, we were always kind of supplier pharmacies and pharmacists to vaccines. And so when it became clear that we were going to have to vaccinate in nursing homes, that's the program we had to go through to get everybody trained up to do it. That's really impressive. That's awesome.
It is.
Oh, so
he
we
won't tell you,
permission.
but he has the Remington Honor Medal in part because of those contributions.
Awesome.
Well, so I've given maybe 10 vaccinations, and you guys have given a few million. So let's keep things in perspective. But one of the things I'm really proud of was the page one New York Times story showing death rates in nursing homes from COVID climbing, and then falling. And that fall was pharmacists going into those nursing homes to vaccinate.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. That's awesome. Well, let's talk about AIHP, and that is, I'm going to try, and I'll probably be wrong, American Institute for the History of Pharmacy.
Absolutely.
All right, so I'm good.
I'm
right there.
You got it. Yeah.
Explain that organization,
Okay.
and then what your respective roles are there.
Yeah, the group formed in, I think, 1941 at the University of Wisconsin. Some scholars got together and tried to emulate what was going on in Europe with a collation of the history of pharmacy. And it's been building ever since. There's a huge library in the basement of the School of Pharmacy in Madison. And I'm past president. Cynthia is the current president. And we've got a whole variety of programs. The internet is helping a lot in being able to distribute webinars and documents and publications and things like that. Without having to travel to Madison like you would have had to do in the old days. And one of the things that I'm working on right now is a map of North America. It's mostly U.S. and Canada, but showing historic sites in pharmacy, where the associations were founded, where your alma mater had its first classes, which may not be the building they're in now. Probably is not the building they're in now. The discovery of first-in-class pharmaceuticals, and pop culture stuff. The first banana split in a pharmacy in Latrobe, Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
Everybody knows the story of Coca-Cola and Pepsi and Hires Root Beer and Dr. Pepper were all invented by pharmacists, and so there's map pins for them. For Prohibition, I have a pin at the manufacturing site for Everclear grain alcohol. So we have a little fun with it. And the Bates stamper, for the old timers in the audience, you would stamp a prescription with a number, and the stamp would the machine would automatically advance one number. Oh, you did it in school. You're so young.
Well, I did that.
But we're open for it. So that's at aihp.org/historical markers. And anybody's welcome to nominate another pin that we might have overlooked.
It's going to be fun to see how that progresses, John. You're putting a lot of work in that. And overall, I mean, a lot of folks, you talk to pharmacists, and we tend to concentrate on what really is objective history. We've got our mortars and pestles and that sort of thing, but the subjective history of pharmacy is so fascinating. And those are the stories that are harder to find, important to tell, and are very timely. We've got a member or so that has talked about, and he framed it very poignantly. People are leaving the stage. And you know what that means, as people have aged out, they've got stories, there have been innovations in pharmacy, and, now's the time to kind of capture those. And so that's an emphasis. So a couple of other things. History is required in the curricula for schools of pharmacy, but just a little. And it's some schools have electives and taken it different directions, but it is core but basic, and we have an opportunity to teach it even more in what's called the co-curriculum, basically student organizations, extracurriculars, things like that in the community. And I think that is important. And at the same time, we are a liaison, AIHP, with the History of Pharmacy group at AACP. I know it's a lot of letters, but those are all the educators that are in all the different schools and colleges of pharmacy. So it's important to pay attention to how we can support them also. And so I'm enjoying doing that. Obviously, there are financial needs. Digitization efforts are so important everywhere. We all have things that we'd love to save and know if they're important or not. And so we want to help people in time to know what to do with their artifacts, their collectibles, their many documents, so we don't lose these things.
Yeah, we're involved with the apothecary here in Alexandria, the Stabler Ledbetter Apothecary, and it's historic in the sense that when it closed, it went bankrupt in the early, I think, 30s. They just sealed it off, and they almost destroyed it. And a group of Alexandrians, citizens, saved it, and ultimately it became a museum. But what you ended up with was this sort of unsealing of a pharmacy that had gone out of business one day, and nobody had really touched it since then. So drawers with active product. And just the layout of the pharmacy, plus being here in Alexandria, that was historic. So there's some notes and prescriptions that reference Martha Washington. There's all kinds of interesting stuff in there. And I think obviously I'm a pharmacist nerd, like maybe we all are, but what's so fascinating about this is you walk in there and you notice, hey, they had a dispensing island just like I had when I worked at Kroger in Fairfield, Ohio. And they were like, we're going to do this new model. We're going to put a dispensing island in. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. And then you show up here and you're like, oh, we had that before. So all this commonality and this thread that goes from the earliest pharmacies to today's pharmacies is so important to weave and make sure people understand. Because there's a lot of learning there.
There is learning. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that the in the 1910s, 1920s, the fight was for fair trade. And that was what a bunch of the state associations rallied around. That's the PBM struggle of 100 years ago. And so, human nature doesn't change. There are so many lessons to be learned from what our predecessors went through.
I refer back to, there's a really nice article, it's Open Journal AJPE, about historical discourses and really pharmacist identity in pharmacy education. And it was written about 5 years ago. I think that's right. But it really describes what I've been trying to tell students and pharmacists, meaning that this group that studied this looked at, say, 1800 or so, and we were apothecaries.
Yeah.
All right. And then, you move into the next part, and it's merchandise. Well, dispensing came next, merchandising later, much later, 60s or so, you're the expert advisor. And then on top of that, the healthcare provider. And so what is so challenging for folks is we get new identities over time, but nothing goes away. And I in the time of my time in practice, I was doing all of those, or trying to, and to varying degrees. So that really helped me understand our dilemma, why it's important to understand those things, and what can we, delegate perhaps, but to really characterize the profession today.
Yeah. Cynthia and John, I tell you, I'm a huge history buff. And it's so wonderful to talk to you guys and to have you both here. And first of all, Cynthia, no one as experienced, as knowledgeable, as talented as you has ever sat in that seat, because that's normally my seat that you're sitting in. And so you're really, really
It's
putting
an
me to
upgrade,
shame.
Tom. It is.
It is a significant upgrade.
Oh my!
And John, for you to spend not just that 27 years in service and servicing our country, but then to flip over and kind of see that on more of the capital pharma side, I'm sure is just. You probably have stories that will require a couple bottles of whiskey, and we'll have a good old time. But Chad and I always, I've constantly throughout this podcast 3 or 4 years, talk back about the origin, and we're both very similar, and we love that kind of history. But it's so important for pharmacists to understand, specifically to understand where we've came from. And, number one, we don't want to repeat, some past mistakes. But number two is, pharmacies have always been an integral part of the healthcare system. And now specifically for ASCP and long-term care, with our senior population booming, and we're going to have 74 million people by the year 2030. We say that all the time. And, the need for consultative pharmacists to help that person at home, because they're not going to be in institutions and skilled buildings and hospitals. They're going to be aging in place. And for them to understand the importance of that. And so we have to get back to our historical roots, which is that community feel, being able to pick up the phone, call a pharmacist and say, I have a question. I need some help. This is what Google told me, but I don't know. I'm getting confused, And so I think it's really critical for young pharmacists to understand that that's where we've came from, and we're progressing, even though we need to kind of get back to that originality.
There's a series of these map pins where I'm placing them at the pharmacy of this, accomplished person in 1890. Well, so the name of their business would be druggist and bookseller, druggist and postmaster, and it just goes on. But it's your point of integration with the community, not just talking to other pharmacists, but us and everybody else.
Really great. I didn't know that. I'm gonna have to look at that.
Yeah,
that's cool.
It's on the web.
Yeah. I'm a map nerd too, so I actually have a map that says all the places visited by myself, and I've been pinning, every state, and I just hit my 50th state here a couple months ago, and so now we got a world map. I guess.
When you're going on a road trip or planning your next family vacation, we can get you to the pharmacy museums all around the country. So
that's what I was exactly going towards. Is I would love to see the pharmacy map. I live in Clayton, North Carolina. There's probably not much marks there, but North Carolina, New Bern, and Pepsi is just a couple hours away, and we're
let's see. This one is the Asheville project is there for its contributions to medication therapy management, and you'll tell me which ones I'm missing. That's what I need.
There's also a link on there to pharmacy museums by region. And so that's kind of fun too, speaking of the road trip.
I think what I would like to see happen, this is just my personal thought, because being on the board of Stabler Ledbetter, we have the museum. It's not a long tour. It's not a big building. It's just an old pharmacy. It takes about 15 minutes, and they run some programs through that are loosely healthcare related and era related. They do a Harry Potter thing for kids, which is super neat. But it would be nice to see like a tour of something about pharmacy, move around to these, maybe the more capable pharmacies around the country, almost like you see other tours like the Bodies Tour and, ancient Egypt tours, but to really, always bring something that says, well, I need to go back there. I've seen the apothecary, but I need to go back there because they're doing a program on this, and I want to see
it's
that.
Back to the subjective history of what happened in that building.
And that would be really, really neat.
Chad, you and I have talked about putting together a collection of information regarding long-term care and ASCP and just the history of nursing homes, right? Because Medicare, Medicaid Act came out, and that's what ASCP followed, and, the transition, because we had to invent things in long-term care, like, having 2,000 vials and a nurse, multiple nurses interact. So we had to come out with bingo cards and Mars and those type of things. And there's a lot of history from ASCP.
I don't think you certainly don't appreciate it when you're working. You don't appreciate that what's going on is in some ways history. You don't, at least I don't feel like I'm doing anything historic. But then when you look back and you're like, if we don't write that down, if we don't capture that, it's lost. And I had a professor in college that it was almost funny. He would do a lot of his lecturing, and he would say, well, this drug company, and then he would go, get merged with this drug company, and they got bought to this drug, then he would go, all the way end up and now that's Merck today. And it was always really interesting. And in long-term care, it feels like the same thing. It's like these community pharmacies went together, and then they got bought by Omnicare, and then this person bought them, and they're like, what is that history? Who were those innovators that really laid the groundwork for
So the map has a bunch of that for chain pharmacies. I've done that for chain pharmacies.
Yeah.
But I haven't done it for, Omnicare is on there itself, but I haven't which are it
Right.
would be a diagram that would funnel, right? I don't have the 20 or 100,
Right.
that were the first ones in the 80s, I guess, or 70s maybe.
And we're
whenever
at
it
the
was.
point where, we've obviously, some of those people have left the stage. I really like the way you said that. But a lot of them haven't. And a lot of them that know some of that history haven't. And getting them together to sit down and just dialogue about, hey, on the East Coast, it was this pharmacist that did this thing in long-term care. And this was the person in the Midwest or the West. And these things resonated and caught on. And all those little lines that became what today is contemporary long-term care pharmacy would be fascinating to see.
Have you shared the
And
90th
so-
anniversary?
We have, of course, we've shared the 90th anniversary of Stabler Ledbetter. It was great to have you guys there, and
goodness.
great to have you give your award there.
Oh, it was fun. So many people had not been in the George Washington Monument there,
Yes.
and it was wonderful.
Yeah, we did the 90th anniversary of the citizens, really celebrating the citizens that saved Stabler Ledbetter, and we had it at the Masonic Temple, the Washington Memorial Masonic Temple here, which happened to be, when they built it, I think it was, I might get this wrong, William Ledbetter was part of the group that turned the earth to christen the
very good.
space and build the Masonic Temple. So it had a little
That
bit of a
feels
tie
good,
there, a little bit
yes,
of a tie there.
yes.
But it was, I think even the board, which there have been pharmacists on that board before, but I'm sort of the latest one, and I brought Crystal from NASPA on. They were like, you really think that people are going to pay to go to a dinner and celebrate pharmacy's history? And I'm like, yeah, we lay it right next to
would.
JCPP, and I'll bring
Yes.
60 people,
See,
and they
it
will
was
support
wonderful.
it. And
It was.
everybody had a great time there. Everybody really enjoyed that. And we need to do more things like that.
We do. It's
Yeah.
Colonial Williamsburg uses that phrase, the power of place. So if you can link the things you're interested in or the people to a place, to an event, to a time, which really leads me, you wanted to talk about America
Yeah,
250,
right.
right? So let's do that. I hope anybody who's listening would want to share this. Maybe you're already well on your way. It'll take me a minute, but a year ago in January, so I had talked to a couple of people at JCPP just to kind of get an idea of how do you think pharmacy would link into our semi-quincentennial, this big birthday? And, mulled it over, talked to different people, met a pharmacist whose husband is a historian in North Carolina, and he had some ideas. And then John and myself and Luke, who's the executive director, Nancy Alvarez, the vice president, put together a letter and a plan to propose to JCPP last May. And it was really a challenge. We knew each organization wouldn't do the same thing, but our main three things were to celebrate the semi-quincentennial, I'll say America 250, to collaborate in civic engagement, and to commemorate pharmacy milestones. So we all know the first pharmacy school wasn't until 1821. It wasn't 250 years ago, but so many important things have happened. And we really wanted to give an occasion to really celebrate. So some of us celebrated the bicentennial, the 200th, and not everybody has. And when you think of that in a lifetime, you're lucky if you have two.
Right.
We won't see three, some of us, but it really centered. What I have with me here is the pocket version of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. And I handed some of those out today to members just to keep. But it really centers on the values. You know some of the phrases in the Declaration. And if that's the essential part of our being citizens, of our being engaged in civic manners of all kinds, and people already are, I know that, but how can you tie it in? And so we launched that. We've followed up in some different ways. John's already told you about the historical markers. I followed up. I wanted to get students involved. So I talked with a Phi Lambda Sigma Pharmacy Leadership Society president-elect who gets to pick the leadership challenge for the next year. So long story short, we reached some agreements with some examples, and that's open now for the different chapters of PLS. They'll submit their proposals later in January. And anyway, it's a competition, but it's also a chance to engage the students. And I can't wait to see what they do with social media and all sorts of things. So there are many examples of things things that you'd like to do. And I keep reading about, did you see the clock turned to 2026 and already everything is America 250. It's on the NFL football field. Somebody's saying, get into it, learn an apple pie recipe, whatever you want to do. But we have some built-in things too, because we have Bowl of IGEA recipients from each state. They're recognized for their civic service. And so how can you tie in with what they've learned in leadership? Even things that are going on in states and locales are on the America 250 website. There were some examples. I loved America's Road Trip as another one. And, so make an effort to go see some of these things that we may drive by or don't appreciate because we live in the area. There are oral histories or just, so I would, challenge the associations, the state associations or chapters, to really pick something, and whether it's theming a meeting, whether it's making a big deal of previous award recipients, milestones in the community. There are just so many ways, and you can just let your creativity go, but do something and share it, and be proud, because we've got challenges in the country, but you can read the Declaration of Independence together or part of it, all sorts of things, just to be proud of this anniversary.
Awesome.
But and it's not just a Washington D.C. thing. This should
That's
be
right.
No.
every state, right?
That's right. Every state, every location. So it'll be a great July 4th for sure, but it's all year, it's, and I'll say, being in Maryland, Philadelphia is trying to own this, that they say they're the first of all sorts of things. So I've seen their websites where they've got the first whatever by week, and you can check that out for some ideas, but all in good fun, meant to honor people, and to reaffirm what we think about our country.
Really awesome.
Oh, for sure. I mean, just the fact that this year we're going to have the World Cup here in North America. Yes. We're going to have the Summer Olympics. I mean, this is really just an amazing year, and a historic year that we're going to look back and say, I was a part of that. So It's so exciting to see, though, your involvement and how bringing pharmacy to that forefront. To be honest, it never really kind of crossed my mind. You just live in the day to day. So I really appreciate you guys are going out of your way to make sure that pharmacists are included and the pharmacy, legacy is there and highlighted.
And we'll all learn something in the process for sure.
Absolutely.
Things that we, even because I mentioned one of my degrees was from University of Maryland. And so that school was founded 20 years after Philadelphia. And even in that time, there was no board of pharmacy. There were no pharmacy laws. There were 10 total pharmacists from any school. At that time, it was the fourth school in Maryland, in the state. So, I mean, and of course, physicians had started some of the apothecaries or were behind founding some of the schools. It's interesting to reinvest in that, like you said, it cycles back sometimes. It isn't necessarily a new idea.
That was an era when anything was possible.
Yes,
right.
True.
So we tend to, we'll just follow the path that's always been done, but you don't have to. I mean,
there was no path. Yeah.
When there's no path, or maybe where you are or what needs to be done has no path. Go pioneer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I heard Coca-Cola was going to start adding cocaine back to the drinks this year. So that's even
so.
Perfect.
One of those map pins
is that North Carolina only, or
there is no cocaine in Coca-Cola, but there is decoconized extract in it, and we have a map pin for that.
That's so cool. Well,
check it out.
What's the website again for AIHP?
AIHP.org.
Okay.
And then the markers are at historical markers.
Okay.
One word, historical markers.
So look for information on that. We are going to do some things and hashtag America 250 and incorporate America 250 into the things we're doing. Like I mentioned, our annual meeting, the theme will be about America 250. I even researched, I'm going to try to do a couple posts a month just on America 250, and I'll throw in some pharmacy.
Good.
But I researched my first one, and I'll give everybody like a little prelude. But Andrew Craigie, I believe is his name, was the first
apothecary
general in 1777.
That's impressive.
And, the whole thing around, like I was starting to go down the road of what happened in January of 1776 and what did it relate to pharmacy. And obviously we have, the war is sort of percolating. And it was all about how to get medicine and supplies to the troops and how, there wasn't, to your point, pharmacists and pharmacy schools, but there was all of the medicine and how to move it to where it needed to be for the people that were fighting. And we had these things called apothecaries, which is not a place. It was actually a person. Yes. Probably a person and a place, I guess. But it's super interesting.
It is. And the timing, of course, of Ken Burns' special series on the American Revolution. And if you've watched it or are in the process of that, I mean, it brings to light many things. There were first people here and how those nations were not considered in the Western expansion. So, you could have a movie watch or book club or just any number of things to really tie in, I think. It'd be great to share with other people what you're planning.
You don't have to do it all yourself. Your county probably has an organizing committee, and your state certainly does. So just join in with whatever is going on near you.
If you go to America 250, you can select your state, and then other locales are already there. It's of course well underway. It's sponsored by numerous organizations, and so find out what's of interest to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. And thank you for what you do for the history of pharmacy. It's super important.
It is. Enjoy it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jed.
All right. Tom, any last words?
No, this has been great. Again, this is right up my alley. Love it. And really enjoy getting to know you guys a little bit, and can't wait to have you back on around July 4th so we can celebrate again.
And we'll have to talk about that long-term care pharmacy project where we make all those dot connections and
Don may have some time
down. I know, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, happy birthday, America.
There you go. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time on Rxperience.